Trying to decide between the Canon 90D and the EOS R? Well, both are great cameras, but they're aimed at two different consumers. Join me as I compare the capabilities of these two cameras and help you decide the best camera for you.
Delivering informative capability-based reviews and tutorials on camera gear, filming techniques, and content creation.
Hi, I'm Simon and this is The Ordinary Filmmaker. If you're new here, please like and subscribe as it really helps my channel grow. And all the links to everything I talk about in this video are placed in the description down below. The EOS R is $600 more than the 90D at regular price. Looking at historical data, we can see that the two cameras have come within a few $100s of each other over the past 6 months. This is not an apples to apples comparison. Some would say that they are very different cameras. You can't compare them. That comparing the 90D to the EOS RP would be far more fair. I'm comparing them because you're trying to decide which camera you should get. In this case, the more money doesn't mean the more capable camera. For photographers, it's a different story, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The EOS R and the 90D are priced so close that people naturally start to compare them. By the end of this video, you'll know which camera is best for you. I'll provide you with the tools to easily compare these cameras, lenses, and other technologies in a simple visual heat map. The 90D is a full-featured hybrid APS-C camera, while the EOS R is a full-frame camera. The 90D is aimed at around mid to high-end, while the EOS R is an entry-level full-frame camera. Full-frame sensors are twice as big, contain twice the detail, but cost more to manufacture, which means we pay more. Full-frame cameras have more expensive lenses, true, but still have a large selection of affordable lenses, which I'll discuss below. An APS-C sensor captures less of the subject using the same lens. This is an image I took of a feijoa tree. Well, it's kind of not a feijoa tree yet, but give it a few years. The whole image is what the EOS R is able to capture. The 90D, with its crop APS-C sensor, at the same distance captures about half the information. The 90D has a 1.6 crop factor. This is good and bad. What do you want to capture? Do you shoot wildlife or astrophotography or general purpose run and gun work? The 90D 1.6 crop factor can give you that extra zoom, but do a lot of low light or portrait photography, and the EOS R is better suited. It provides a beautiful blurred background when you need it. For portrait photography, I'd choose the EOS R over the 90D. The Canon 90D has the EFS lens mount and can be used with more expensive EF lenses designed for full-frame DSLRs like the 1DX Mark III. It doesn't even require an adapter. This provides you with up to 107 lenses that have been developed over the last 30 years for both EF and EFS. There's also a large used market for these lenses. It's easy to find once expensive lenses like the EF 100-400 at more affordable prices. The EOS R uses the new RF mount. There are 11 RF lenses available with another 6 due out this year, and all but 3 of these lenses are well over $1,000, providing a few options, right? No, not at all. For $100, all of those 107 EF lenses that I talked about can be mounted to the EOS R without any issues, although the EFS lenses will still maintain their crop factor. You see, the RF mount provides the best of both worlds. You get the new and innovative RF lenses, but you get access to a deep inventory of EF glass and affordable options in the used market. The EF mount has access to lenses not yet available to the RF mount, like the very expensive 400mm f2.8. And yet, people say that the RF lenses are expensive. Be careful selecting lenses for the 90D. A lot of reviews analyze and look at the lenses from the viewpoint of a full-frame camera. An EF 100mm lens on the EOS R is a great portrait lens, but on the 90D, the 1.6 crop factor pretty much gives you the same results as bolting on a 160mm lens. The crop also affects the f-stop. The 50mm f1.2 provides the same results as an 80mm f2. If you end up buying the 90D, be sure to take into account the crop effect when shopping for lenses. Don't make the mistake I did when I first started out. If you're starting out and you've got a small budget, there are a few good lenses for both cameras. For the EOS R, the 24-105 can be had for $399. It's a great general purpose lens for the ordinary filmmaker. It's silent for video and takes great photos. The lens works for traveling, for sports photography, and for portraits. And it covers all the major focal lengths from 18 to 24, all the way through 50, 70, 80, and up to 100. The only negative is that there has to be an f-stop, that it has a variable f-stop between 4 and 7.1. But for the ordinary filmmaker, especially one starting out, this shouldn't pose a problem. Don't overcomplicate things. Begin filming and shooting with settings on automatic or use the built-in scenes. As you get familiar with your camera, experiment with aperture priority or time priority. And then as you become more experienced, move to manual for the best results for video and photos. Don't have a tight budget? I'd still consider the 24-105 lens as your go-to, but get the L series. It has the same focal length, but it has a fixed f-stop through the entire focal range, providing better low-light performance, and it's also weather sealed. It's a little bit pricey, but not overly so at around $1,000. It will provide sharper images from the center of the frame all the way out to the edges through all the focal lengths. I'd also consider the RF 24-240. It's another great general purpose lens offering 10 times optical zoom. This one's priced at $899, but can be had for less on some used sites. For the 90D, the 18-135 USM is a great starter lens. I've been using it on my 70D for 7 years now. I'd say it's on my camera 95% of the time when I'm doing run and gun work. For this channel, I use the 50mm 1.2 about 100% of the time. The 18-135 is very similar and is pretty wide, capturing landscape scenes like this one of Mount Washington in New Hampshire or Lake Placid in New York. But when fully zoomed in, it's great for travel and sports photography. But don't forget to remember the crop factor. The 18-135 focal range gives the equivalent of 29 to 216. Not as wide as the EOS R with the 24-105, but not as zoomed in either. Without applying the crop factor, the 18-135 appears to shoot wider than the 24-105, the equivalent of 29, which is still a good focal length for capturing landscapes, as you can see here. But what makes the 18-135 so great is how far it can zoom in, making it a great all-round general purpose lens. It's great for sports shooting, portraits, and video work, and it's really a good starter lens for astrophotography and video as well. The Canon 90D with the 18-135 is $1,600. The EOS R with the 24-105 is $2,200, and so we're still got that $600 difference between the two. While the upcoming EOS R6 is not considered the successor to the EOS R, it will release, or when it releases, that will cause the price of the EOS R to drop and will likely replace it, giving you an opportunity to get the EOS R at a lower price. The used price for a camera will drop even further as people rush to sell their EOS Rs for the R5 or R6. Canon is expected to announce the R5 shortly, with it available for sale in July. The R6 will get announced sometime shortly after that and be available late summer. Canon is known for its color science. Many people swear by it. I don't really care that Canon produces slightly different colors than Sony or Fuji. It's kind of like shopping for a new TV. They all look so different in the store, but when you get it home, well, you kind of get used to it, good or bad. What really matters is how well the camera's image of the subject or landscape matches reality, how well it accurately captures skin tones. I don't want reds to look orange or blues to look green, and for video work, I don't want to spend an awful lot of time color balancing. Canon cameras do a great job of delivering accurate colors when shooting outside on both the 90D and the EOS R, but the EOS R comes out ahead, producing better color accuracy with less noise in low light. Skin tones are also well represented. For videos that I shoot outside on a bright day, I'm hard-pressed to see a difference between the balanced and non-balanced videos or photos. Most of the time, I'm happy to send the images to my friends or family right out of the camera. When shooting inside, or at dawn or dusk, the images and videos tend to need some work to get the colors balanced right. If you're not familiar with color balancing, it is about making sure that the red, green, and blue are properly balanced and that exposure and saturation are set correctly. Most of us cheat by choosing that auto enhance to get a decent result most of the time. The rest of the time, it gets everything wrong. As you get used to your camera, experiment with balancing and doing all the photo work yourself using the tools provided. For video, it's as simple as holding up a white balance card like this at the beginning of each shoot. Now, if the clouds or something else causes the lighting to change, then rebalance the white again. I use this for all my videos. Don't have a white balance card? Well, just use a piece of paper. Color balancing ensures that the photo or video matches the real-life representation from what was taken. Color grading is often thought to be the same as color balancing. Color grading is done after color balancing to give the video or photo a certain look. Videos have multiple clips and sometimes use multiple cameras. The exposure, ISO, and colors will appear different from clip to clip. Balancing will help create a unified look for the scene. If you're starting out, work with one camera at a time and don't get crazy. Avoid shooting in auto mode for your YouTube or event work. Constantly changing exposure or ISO levels will provide a very amateurish and frustrating look. For run and gun family videos, don't worry about this. Keep it on auto and keep your camera, well, if you keep it on auto, most of the time it's ready to go, you don't have to fiddle with anything, and you'll get a really good shot. Keep each shot focused on a single area and watch out for changing light patterns. It's impossible to properly correct a clip in post if the exposure changes during the clip. If you're starting out, learn the filming basics. In editing, if you do have a changing exposure, just go ahead and edit out that little bit and then fix the rest. I understand how to hold the camera, how to set up the scene, how to move, and when to move the camera. The next time you watch a TV show, notice how they cut or focus on the subject and how they set up the music or set the score. I used the Grand Tour and Top Gear for case studies and for inspiration. They seem to do everything right, from setting the mood, the scene, the score, tone, effects, and just the overall shots. But then again, they have a crew of 30 to shoot each episode. I'm not even going to get into post-production. Sharpness is the amount of clarity in an image. Detail is the amount of information we get from the sensor. The larger the sensor, the more information we get. Both the EOS R and the 90D have an anti-aliasing filter that helps prevent moire. Moire is the effect you see when taking a picture of a plaid shirt or other patterns where the lines are close together. Unfortunately, this filter blurs or creates softness, and that's not good. No amount of sharpening can fix this. It's easy to take a sharp image and create an effective blur, but the reverse just isn't possible. Detail is largely dependent on the amount of information captured with each frame or photo. A full frame sensor captures more information with each frame, but the aliasing filter on the 90D and EOS R sadly create that unwanted softness. An external video recorder through the HDMI out captures video straight from the sensor, providing more clarity, but this adds weight, additional kit, and by the time you're done, probably adds another $1,000 to your kitted out rig. For fast action photography, the Canon 90D captures up to 11 frames per second with continuous autofocus, outshooting the EOS R by as much as 5 times. The 90D can function as a sport shooter for the ordinary filmmaker, while the EOS R can't. Well, and this is the frustrating thing, the EOS R has really a top speed of 3 frames per second with continuous autofocus on. My older 70D was used to capture these water skiing photos, and it did so at 7 frames per second. But once you start to get much below 7 frames per second, any form of sports photography becomes a bit of a challenge to get the right shot. The EOS R can capture up to 480 megabits of information every second. That's 3 times what the 90D is capable of. The EOS R captures 3 times the information as the 90D because it uses the highly compressed IPB video codec. Shooting for YouTube or any other scene where your subject doesn't move around a whole lot, you're not really going to notice a difference between IPB and all-I, unless of course you're one of those pixel peepers. However, capture a moving subject and the results will look a little off. They won't look smooth or quite right. IPB, also known as long GOP, captures a full image every 3 frames. 2 in-between frames are guessed by the camera on what it expects to be there. On the plus side, files are about 3 times the size, which adds up over time. However, I prefer all-I. It provides the best quality and the image stands up under motion and can tolerate aggressive color effects. For most scenarios, IPB will deliver great results and require less storage. What outcomes do you want? Do you want to capture life as it happens? Is your audience family and friends? Will you be posting on YouTube or other social media? If you answer yes to most of these questions, then IPB will be fine for you. However, if you want to capture the highest quality video, your subject is moving a lot, or you use a lot of effects, All-I provides better results. Unfortunately, Canon removed All-I from the 90D. I don't know why they did this. It was in the 80D and it's in my 70-year-old 70D that I'm using right now. The EOS R comes with C-Log. The 90D does not. C-Log provides greater dynamic range. Dynamic range captures more information. Imagine shooting from the back seat of a car through the windshield. The driver is in focus and exposed properly, but the view out the window is overexposed. With increased dynamic range, the same scene keeps the driver exposed properly, but also exposes the windshield a whole lot better. With the recent firmware update to the 90D, both cameras can shoot video in all the basic frame rates. That includes 24 frames per second in North America and 25 frames per second for PAL regions, and of course 30 frames per second for both NTSC and PAL regions. The EOS R provides full sensor readout in 1080, but suffers a 1.7 crop in 4K. While not a problem for some, if you're considering the 90D and the EOS R, well, they both provide crop in 4K. The EOS R's crop in 4K is 1.7, as I just said, while the 90D provides a 1.6 crop. Now, you might be saying, wait a minute, I've heard that the 90D provides 4K video without a crop. This is half the truth. The 90D does not provide any additional crop when shooting 4K, but the 90D uses that APS-C sensor, which, if you remember, has a 1.6 crop. So for whatever issues cropping provides, both cameras equally suffer from it. Don't want a 4K crop? Well, you better be prepared to spend a lot more or increase your budget. The EOS R records 1080 video with full sensor readout, yielding better video quality than is possible with the Canon 90D. Video from the EOS R will have less noise, more dynamic range, and more detail. However, the 90D can deliver high-quality 1080 video that is clearer and sharper, or as clear and sharp as the EOS R. Simply record your videos in 4K, then downsample them to 1080. This process will result in detailed and sharp video, much sharper than if you had just shot in 1080 alone. The IPB codec will ensure that the file sizes won't be unmanageable. But there is one potential problem, and it's a biggie. You want to make sure your computer is new enough to be able to manage editing 4K video. Now, downsampling is a very simple thing to do. In your video editing software, when you set up your project, set it to 1920 by 1080. When you load the video into your project, the software will automatically downsample and do all the work for you. But if you want to simulate multiple camera angles using 4K video as a master file, as you zoom in, the video will become a little bit soft. Neither camera delivers detailed 4K that's clear enough. Looking for detailed and high quality video? Well, you might want to consider the new and upcoming Canon EOS R and R6. Sorry, the EOS R5 and R6. These cameras will have much better detailed 4K. The R5 is a 5 series camera and will have a price to match. The R6, though, will have 4K 60 and be much more detailed than the EOS R. Price-wise, the R6 is expected to deliver a price similar to the EOS R introductory price. Now, I'm not happy with the 90D or the EOS R level of detail, which is why I'm still shooting with the 70D in 2020 and waiting for the R5 and R6. As a YouTuber, I need to be able to simulate multiple camera angles without losing detail. Here's an example of the power of 4K master file. I shot this in a single take in a 4K clip from the Mavic Pro. In each cut, I zoom in, I adjust the frame to simulate a different camera angle. By changing the angle, the scene becomes more interesting. The source video is detailed enough that I can do this. If I did this with the 90D, well, or the EOS R, the end result would be soft, appearing almost blurry. Slow motion is a great tool to enhance storytelling, delivering that extra emotional punch. I love using it to slow down moments that matter, moments that I want to isolate from time. Cameras deliver buttery smooth slow motion when the frame rate is set to 120 frames per second. This is the ideal rate to generate that buttery smooth slow motion. Avoid 60 frames per second as it's just not slow enough. It doesn't give you that really buttery smooth slow motion. A big plus for the 90D is that it does provide 120 frames per second and a decent amount of detail as well. But Canon for some reason decided to disable autofocus in 120 frames per second on the 90D, so if your subject is moving around, the camera will not adjust to keep the subject in focus. But there is a relatively simple workaround. Set the f-stop to f8 or greater and your subject should stay in focus. The only problem, you won't have a blurred background and you'll need to test things out before filming and check it afterwards to make sure your subject did stay in focus. Other than the lack of autofocus, the 90D provides solid results. The EOS R provides 120 frames per second, but it does so in 720p. This was unacceptable in 2018 and it hasn't aged well at all. Most full-frame cameras offer 120 frames per second in 1080 and 60 frames per second in 4K. Newer models are even offering 120 frames per second in 4K, although they do cost a bit more. And let's not forget the cheaper APS-C 90D that I just talked about. It has 120 frames per second in 1080. Is slow motion a capability you need? Do you need it in 1080 or 4K? If video is your focus and you're not playing with slow motion, the chances are you will over the next few years. It's a very powerful storytelling tool. I consider it essential. I'm not pleased with the slow motion capabilities of either camera, but I'm willing to give the 90D a pass as it produces solid results. The Canon 90D and the EOS R are virtually the same weight when paired with lenses. While some RF lenses are quite heavy, most lenses are lighter than their EF counterparts. Both cameras feel good in the hands and are balanced well. The 90D size allows for a full-size battery rated at 1300 shots per charge, although actual performance will be a little bit better. Now the EOS R, not so good. We only get 370 shots per charge. Again, real life will provide more shots, but it's still disappointing. The 90D provides all-day use. I was in France last year and I brought extra batteries with me, but only needed to change the battery once on one day. And that was because I was shooting an awful lot of video. It's nice not having to switch out the battery several times a day, but then again, it's also an easy problem to overcome with spares. In 2020, shot capacity is still an issue for mirrorless cameras and they have yet to overcome it. The Canon 90D is a great camera for ordinary filmmakers and photographers, but the EOS R, despite what many have heard, is an excellent and solid camera when it comes to photography. The EOS R is better than the 5D Mark IV in almost every way but battery life and frames per second. The EOS R has better ISO performance, much better focus points or much more focus points, higher resolution LCD, is 200 grams lighter, provides better autofocus sensitivity, and it has an articulating screen, which is great. And then there's that much faster processor. Now granted, dynamic range is about the same and so is color depth. And sure, the EOS R is slower with continuous autofocus on, but it is significantly cheaper. Are you a photographer most of the time? Then maybe consider the EOS R first. Finding the best camera means knowing what you want to get out of it. How will you use the camera? Will you shoot more video than photos, or the other way around? I shoot video 95% of the time. I shoot run and gun and YouTube content, but I also shoot my share of photos. Do you want to be able to take very good landscapes or portraits? The 90D is faster, being able to shoot 11 frames per second with very good autofocus in continuous mode. The 90D does a good job in most fast action situations, from water skiing to kids playing around and playing sports. The EOS R, with its full frame sensor, delivers better portraits, but comes up short in fast action photography. With continuous autofocus, you'll be lucky to get 2 to 3 shots or frames per second. Despite being a mirrorless version of the 5D Mark IV, the EOS R is considerably slower at taking photos. So if you need a camera capable of performing well in fast action, of these two, I would consider the 90D first. I shoot a lot of video where my subject is in motion. I shoot outdoors 90% of the time. The 90D and the EOS R missed the mark on key capabilities that I need. I need detailed 4K 30. I need 24 frames per second. I need highly reliable continuous autofocus. I need that for video where my subject is always moving. I need 120 frames per second, and I need it in 1080p. And I'd really prefer 4K without crop, although I could manage with a 1.2 or 1.1 crop. Now this diagram represents the capabilities that I personally need. This allows me to visualize, to compare two cameras side by side with a heat map. This visual representation is much easier to reference than a bunch of notes or an Excel spreadsheet like this. It's long and hard to compare visually. I use a simple 3-color code to tell me how each camera performs. Green is great, red is poor or non-existent, and orange is somewhere in between. This is a summary of what I've discussed in this video review to this point. Do your use cases align with this? No? Well, then take this diagram, tweak it, and adjust it. I use Keynote on the Mac because it's free, but on Windows you could use PowerPoint to do the same thing. This model can be adapted to lenses or other products that are not so easy to compare. Adjust and make it your own. Visually cut through the detail and help make informed decisions. Oh, and one last thing. I recommend creating a second heat map, a heat map that identifies high priority capabilities, must-haves. Here I simply created a red outline for those capabilities that I consider absolutely mandatory. For my needs, the EOS R did not do well, but your needs are different than mine. The 90D is capability rich, easy to use, and performs great equally for video and photo use cases. It's great for beginners and intermediate photo and video users. The EOS R is aimed at photographers that use video occasionally, photographers that do not need fast frame rates but are looking for an improvement over the 5D Mark IV. In most ways, the EOS R is a more advanced camera and great for portraits with its full frame sensor. While this video looks at the EOS R in 90D, if you can increase your budget to about $2,500, consider waiting until Canon announces the EOS R6. It will be priced similar to the EOS R when it comes out and be much more capable for both video and photo users. Disagree? Or have a question about this video? Drop your comments or questions in the comment section down below. That's it for now. Thanks so much for watching The Ordinary Filmmaker. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you for watching The Ordinary Filmmaker. All equipment used and notes are placed in the description box, show more box, or down arrow thingy next to the title on the mobile app.